G'day, folks. Two ordinary cops. Schulte, we're back. We had a little glitch then, which was very funny, but that's okay. No one else needs to know about it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Schulte hit record and I froze. As in internet. Not to worry. That's all good. That's all good.
Yeah.
Technical issues. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. Yeah, cruising along well. We're getting ready. We've got a bit of exciting news. We'll probably mention that in a bit. But first off, mate, thank you to everybody that sent in messages about the Ben Robert Smith. A lot of support and a lot of people agreeing with our take on it. And also adding a few different points and all that sort of thing. It's something that's going to get a lot more interest as it goes along, I imagine. And look, it's going to go on for years. That's the shit thing, Basically,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you what, they better have something good because you're putting his life and his family's life on hold. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they better have all those T's crossed and I's dotted. That's for sure.
Yeah, mate. It was. I think our point was to 360 degree it. We don't just come at it from one closed-minded thing. It's look at all the evidence. No one's above the law. We all know that. But I think that the throwaway lines were justice denied, justice delayed, justice denied. A lot to think about there. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to look. But the whole thing just irks me really. But anyway, it is what it is.
Yep. We'll deal with it as it comes.
Yeah,
Mate, also we got a bit more exciting news next week. We're going to the suicide prevention conference in Sydney.
yeah,
That's one of the things we've had coming up for a while. So we got invited down. We're working with Bellator Fortitudinum, so Nick White got in contact with us and asked us to come down and join him down there. So that's really good, and thanks Nick for that. That's absolutely fantastic. So basically, the thing is, mate, I'm driving down to see you on Anzac Day. So
yeah.
I'll get there about 8 in the morning, and then we'll do the Anzac Day thing, and then Sunday you and I are just doing a couple of chores and having a couple of beers, and then Monday we head down. So
Yep.
yeah, mate, you want to add anything more in that?
No, it should be interesting. Look, we've had a lot to do. I've had a lot to do with the investigative and response side to suicide. Very much operational policing. A lot to do with the back of house as far as coronial investigations go. In my role as the coroner's constable in Alice Springs, so I've got a lot of operational experience around suicide. So that should be interesting just to see what everyone thinks. And I don't know. I just sort of might listen for a while and then I don't know. We'll probably do a recording. We might interview a few people. We'll see what happens. So
Yep.
that'll be good. We'll go down and see what goes on there and see what they're doing. And we'll have a comment on it and go from there. I'm hoping to see some practical solutions. Really, so that's where I come from. I don't really do. Ironically, I do a talk fest in that I do a bloody podcast, but I don't necessarily like a talk fest. I like to see practical outcomes. So anyway,
Yeah.
we'll see what it's all. I'm sure they've got plenty of that in mind, so it should be good. Looking forward
It
to it.
should be. Yeah, mate, and look, one of the positives, we'll get to meet a whole lot of people as well. Have a chat, like you said, get some insight from different points of view, and also finally get to catch up with Nick. So
Yeah,
that'd be good, and probably have one or two beers with him and a meal and all that sort of stuff. So
well, I'd say so. Yep. Yeah.
yeah, mate. And look, also your comment last week in relation to in custody, you asked about Victoria and and called out Damo Duggs, and mate, he got onto us straight away. So basically, yeah, like down in Victoria, it's slightly different under the Police Custody and Crimes Act 58, actually. Yeah, so that's pretty old. A person in custody, if under lawful arrest or in the company of an investigator being investigated for an offence, where there is sufficient evidence to justify the arrest. So yeah, so basically he's saying that during a traffic stop, you're not under arrest, so or not in police custody. So
Yeah, which is a damn sight different to the old NT, which was the widest paintbrush in the bush. Basically, drive past a bloke on the side of the road, say, "G'day, mate, how you going?" Poor bugger's probably considered in custody for about 10
yep.
minutes. So, yeah, so that's a bit different. So I think though, and once again, Damo, we're shouting you out again. I do believe there is such a thing as more in relation to death. It goes death after contact with Victoria Police. And the reason I know that is because we were involved in an incident where, very long story short, a person we arrested for historic child sex offences in Victoria, we arrested him in the Northern Territory, used our laws up there to get him bailed through our courts back to Victoria with the requirement that he leaves the NT, blah, 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 or he'll be in breach of bail in the NT. He took his own life on the way back to Victoria, and I was in contact with a Victorian inspector, and it came back that it didn't meet the definition, because the definition of the Act actually says contact with Victoria Police. They didn't have contact with Victoria Police. They had contact with the Northern Territory Police. So, and I think from memory, the Deputy Coroner ruled it not a death in custody. He said he's been arrested, charged, bailed, and then, very many hours later made the decision to kill himself. So that's where that came into it. It was just an interesting legal battle, really, to see what the definition of it was.
Yeah, mate, that's interesting. And actually, you brought up another point that I'll just segue a little bit there. And not that I dealt with it, but I heard quite a few cops talk about this, especially the ones that were doing extraditions and going down and in relation to old sexual offences, historic, where they finally caught up to them or got enough evidence after so many years, decades, usually. A lot of the time when they did get confronted with the charges, a lot of them have actually committed suicide.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, and you probably know a bit more about that than I do. I just remember a lot of cops talking about it, in different cases they've done. So,
yeah, well, just the one that I can remember anyway. It was just that one particular one, because I had a lot to do with that job. Me and a colleague located the fella. Basically, just didn't look right, looked out of place. So we just ran a check on his rego. That came back with a hit from down south that's saying that he was wanted for this stuff and that stuff. So we went back, made a bit of a plan, did a fair bit of research into who he was, what he was doing, where he was staying. Had a chat to Victoria whether they wanted him or not. I believe that the determination was that he would have a warrant, and if he returns to Victoria, he'd be sought after. So we thought, we'll see what we can do, and that's when we worked out we could actually arrest him for the interstate offence and get him bailed back there. So that's what we did. And yeah, what he did after that was up to him. So
yeah. So it was just something I thought I'd just segue a little bit there. But mate, tonight we're going to talk about. We got a message through in relation to talking about the Liquor Act in the Northern Territory. Now, every police officer in the Northern Territory, doesn't matter where you are, is very well aware of the Liquor Act. However, it changes depending on your location. So there's different. Even under the intervention, that was another tricky kettle of fish. So the intervention, of course, I think it dealt with Aboriginal land. But whereas, say, Kalkaringi, for example, you're coming in, and as soon as you hit the grid, it was considered under the intervention, the Liquor Act. As soon as you crossed over the bridge, the river, which is started the town, as it's a gazetted town, it then went back to the Liquor Act. Yeah. If you went through, as soon as you got past, I can't remember exactly where it was, going out to Dagaragu.
Dagaragu, yeah.
It then turned back in under the intervention. So you had to, wherever you found the liquor and the people, you had to use that legislation in relation to that. And each town...
Even better was if they were on the outside of the old green grid. They were technically on Wave Hill Station, which is freehold land, and they can drink as much as they want. So it was a shit show. It really was. And we can go into that a bit. So a lot of people wouldn't realise that the Northern Territory's got a hell of a reputation for drinking, which it deserves, just quietly. Yeah. However, it's also got the strictest liquor laws in the country by a country mile. No one comes close to the Northern Territory as far as legislation in relation to alcohol. Down here, it's not even really considered a thing. You go to the bottle shop, you get a carton of beer, see you later, whatever. It's not even an issue. Where you drink, it's up to you. I'm not entirely sure of the laws in New South Wales, but I know you can't just drink in public, but it's not considered a major thing, and it's certainly not something you see all the time. Yeah, you might see someone walking down to the pub with a can because they're coming from a house party, walking to the pub, they've got a can in their hand, drinking in public. I'm sure that's unlawful in big public areas, but it certainly doesn't really raise the eyes too much. Whereas in the NT, it's a huge deal because it is a huge causal factor in relation to almost everything: domestic violence, social order offences, sexual assaults, you name it, assaults in
Adult
general.
entries. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a reason why the law in the NT is so strict. But it's funny you started off with that the Liquor Act where it relates to Aboriginal land under the Aboriginal Lands Act, and then it reverts back saying that land it's prohibited. But then there's also clauses where people can get permits at time. You
Exemption.
can have a permit exemptions there, so you can have a permit to drink on land, but there are very tight rules that go with that exemption or that permit to drink. The permit system was pretty good. It allowed people who aren't going to hurt anybody, who just want to have a glass of wine or a beer at night in their own house, to do so. Um, where the problem lies is there seems to be an issue within Aboriginal communities where it's not having a quiet beer at night, it's drinking 15 cartons and then bashing everybody and driving cars around and just going ballistic. And that's why those laws are there. And, there's obviously a massive problem up there with public drunkenness. Lots of people sitting around in parks drinking, and then the associated social order and more serious offences that roll on from that. And for those reasons, that's why that alcohol is considered such an issue in the NT.
Yeah. Yeah, mate, definitely. Just to give people an idea, I was talking with especially the Liquor Commission up there at certain times, and I said it'd be easier if they had actually more of a blanket approach because I mean we understood it because we worked in those areas, but each one was slightly different. Like you said, the permit system in Kalkaringi, but you could get spirits if you wanted to. There was really no restriction on the amount you had, and even Lajamanu had that as well. But it wasn't allowed spirits. Was it only allowed beer? I can't remember.
Oh, I can't remember, mate. God, yeah.
But then you got Manangrita, where they had a wet barge every fortnight, and you could only buy 2 cartons of mid strength beer or one carton of full strength beer, and that's all you're allowed, per permit. And it would come in on the barge, and so and I think it came in on a Saturday or something, and yeah, yeah, you had your work cut out for you when that happened. But only people with permits could get it, and of course the police monitored the permits. If you got charged with an offence, especially in relation to liquor, it got canned, or say domestic violence order or something like that. It was revoked. But yeah, I mean, if you look at that, and then of course as soon as you go outside Manangredi, go down to Ramangeni, where I was, completely dry. You're not allowed alcohol at all.
Yeah.
Um, the only exemption in that area was Dippery Barra Lodge, but that had to go through. That's because they're taking a lot of people. It was turning over a phenomenal amount of money, and a good service for catching barramundi or fishing, game fishing basically in the Northern Territory, and it was very well run, and still is. And like for that Liquor Act, I was actually part of that one getting his permit through because it needed not only the elders of the community, but the Liquor Commission as well as the OSC of the police station out there. So we all had to write a report on the I suppose pros and cons in relation to issuing it, and it did get issued, and rightly so. It was they've never had an issue out there as well. When I was out there, there was never an issue. So
No, and you know what? I'm just going to speak frankly now. I'm not in the cops anymore. It's like me and you, mate. You can pour grog into our heads until we fall over backwards. And guess what? We're going to sing badly. We're going to probably say "love you, man" lots. We might cuddle each other, but I guarantee you, no one's getting hurt. No
no,
one's getting in a fight. No one's getting raped. There's no domestic violence. There's no nothing. There's a shitload of personal responsibility, and that's the way it is. If I do something wrong on the grog, that's on me. It's not on the grog. So to me, I know you can't just go carte blanche, release it, let's go, everyone who messes up on the grog, because it's just unrealistic. But realistically, it's like, are we going to treat them as adults, adult human beings here? It's like, you can have a drink if you want. Why don't you go to work and earn the money and buy the grog yourself, that sort of thing. So my thoughts on it were that it's a removal. It's a removal of freedom, but it's also a removal of a person's responsibility for their own conduct.
Yep.
And I never really liked it much. I mean, I knew it was needed. I'm not stupid, but I still thought, no, get some personal responsibility. If you commit offences on the grog, you get going to jail just like I would.
Yep.
So, if the jail's chock a block full, okay, you don't have to go to jail. It's an option. So
Yep.
I don't know. That was my thoughts. It used to irritate me. Oh, the grog's real bad. The grog's bad. No, it's not.
It's
But all my family, we all have drinks. We all do the rest of it. We're not raging. Oh, we probably are on the spectrum for alcoholism, but I don't think we're raging. We're all tax-paying, hard-working people. It's not. I've never seen domestic violence in my family ever. So,
yep.
extended family, it's yeah, we have a drink and no one gets hurt, and we carry on, and I think the rest of the time, I think we contribute to society. So
Yep.
that's my kind of thoughts on that. But I'm also not so naive that I don't think there is need for something up there, because we don't have the resources to just deal with it carte blanche, and we used to deal with it quite a bit. It's a fine balance between people's liberty, individual responsibility, not collective responsibility. And yeah, I don't know. It always irked me a bit.
Mate, I completely agree with you there, and the reason being is I know a lot of liquor outlets. They had very stringent laws and requirements when they're selling alcohol. However, when you think of how much they actually sell, they do it pretty well. Basically, at the end of the day. However, if they do stuff up, liquor commission's onto them. And look, yes, what they've done is against the law and all that sort of thing. I think one location out bush, I had to serve. It was 110 breaches to this one place. But if you look at this one place, they have probably communities coming from all directions buying alcohol. And I remember serving it, and we knew the publican pretty well. And I said, look, I don't completely agree with. I've got to serve this because I've been asked to. I'm an officer of the law and all this sort of thing. And you've breached them, and well, these are the allegations. I said, however, one thing that does annoy me is the fact of there's no responsibility put on the people purchasing it.
Yeah,
And because I said they end up driving drunk later on, after they've had 15 cans on the way home. I said, or they pull up at the grid and, drink themselves into a stupor, and then, like, sometimes it's a war zone up there. The
yeah,
amount of people we've had from those drinking areas, with broken limbs and passed out or knocked out. And, we got heaps of sorry. We're not going to share them because they're horrific. They are
yeah,
really horrific. So, but where's their responsibility? Yes, they get dealt with as per law, what we can prove. Mind you, everybody's so bloody drunk, it's a bit hard to prove who did what
yeah,
at times. But where is the responsibility on the people actually consuming it?
yeah.
Because, and to me, there was very little. So, mate, I would completely agree with you there. I don't know if you want to add anything on that.
Well, no, I just also make an observation. If you go to Europe, so go to Germany, there's basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's basically no restriction on alcohol. Over 18, I'm pretty sure, no problem. Over 18, you can buy alcohol. You can buy it at a grocery store on the corner, a single can. There's not much tax and excise on it, as far as I'm aware. You walk out of the door, you crack the can, you walk down the street drinking a can of beer like you drink a coffee, and no one would look at you sideways. Where they would look at you sideways is if you carried on like a dickhead while you're drunk.
Yeah.
There's a reason the Germans don't really like British soccer hooligans, soccer fans coming over, because they get on the piss and carry on like clowns. Well, to me, that's a cultural thing with alcohol. It would depend on how you view alcohol. I'm certainly not naive. I know that you're far more likely to get your head punched in a pub at 3 o'clock in the morning than a cafe at 9 a.m. in the morning. All right, I'm not stupid.
Yep.
I know that there's a contributing factor there. What I would say is that, and I know plenty of people who just do not respond well to alcohol. There's probably a handful of very, very good mates, and they have stopped drinking. A very good mate of mine who was, and I've mentioned him before, probably the best General Duties copper I've ever worked with. He was junior to me. He was better than me. He was excellent at what he did. He ended up losing his job, and a lot of it had to do with his conduct while drunk. He just could not drink the stuff. As far as I'm aware, he's gotten off it now and he's cleaned himself right up. But he lost his job over it, that sort of carry on. Two other legendary old coppers back in the day, I remember saying to them both, they're both long term non drinkers. And I said, I'd love to get you blokes a bit of a laugh in a room one day with a bottle of rum. And they looked at me and they looked at each other and they looked back at me and they went, no, you wouldn't, mate. They said, it's not even funny. We're just disgusting humans. We're violent. We're nasty. But no. And to me, it's like they know that does it. If alcohol does that to them, that's fine. They've accepted that. And as a result, they don't drink. They don't do it. They don't put themselves in that situation. They've owned that responsibility.
Yep.
That's to me, and it's not even to do with alcohol. This can be to do with cannabis. It can be to do with anything, even illegal substances. There are certain illegal substances that sort of have no redeeming features, like methamphetamine would be my number one idea. And as a result, it's just a banned substance because I don't know anybody who can control himself on methamphetamine. It's just
No.
not you can't. There's no redeeming features. Alcohol has redeeming features. And that's why I can understand why it has a place in society. Same thing if you understand, well, tobacco. People have been smoking for thousands and thousands of years. That's their choice. If people want to smoke, smoke. We know it's bad for you. Please don't smoke around me. I can't stand the shit. But smoke, I don't care. But that's it comes down to the personal freedoms, personal responsibility. Like you don't get to sue anybody when you smoke a certain brand of tobacco and now you're dying. It's like, where does this end? And I know this has been an argument back and forth for a long time. But yeah, the laws in the NT sort of came about because it was much easier to just go blanket, and that allows reasonable resources to enforce that, and you get a harm minimisation effect. But it's at the sacrifice of enforcing personal responsibility.
Yep. Yeah, mate. Like a lot of the time, especially people, the grey nomads for one, or people that are interstate that come up there and can't understand why they have to show their ID when they when they buy liquor
Yeah,
at the in the Northern Territory, and then you got to explain to them as well. The reason is because unfortunately you have to suffer because of the result or the impact of people that can't control it, buying it and
yeah,
drinking it and causing crime. So, and like probably some of the times, I remember one night it just went absolutely nuts. The locals broke into, I think there was a container next to the Catherine Hotel. This is many years ago, and they broke in, and the whole town the next morning was there was bodies passed out everywhere. It was
yeah,
absolutely crazy. Like you were people from the city or anywhere else in the country, apart from maybe WA, some parts of WA, some parts of northern Queensland, maybe some parts of northern South Australia, you just wouldn't understand.
no,
You've got bodies that are literally littered everywhere, and some of them we had to call the ambulance on because we
yeah,
couldn't even get a response out of them.
yeah,
And so that's taking away from people, who actually need the ambulance for
mm,
certain stuff. And
yeah.
this is all
It was an
self-induced.
orgy of consumption. I remember it well. Oh my god!
Well,
Well,
and
what is
look, mate,
going on? It's just places going nuts.
okay, and look, another example. I can't remember this, but the floodwaters came up in Catherine, and I know poor old Catherine, got flooded again recently. But this is, I don't know, back 2008 or something like that. Anyway, we were on a night shift, and the day before, because when the river gets up so high, basically they shut off. They're not allowed to sell liquor, all that sort of thing. So the town was basically down to essentials only. And that night, we got one call out. So we worked a 12-hour shift. This is a time where you get the idea of police sitting back drinking coffee, eating donuts, but we didn't have any donuts, unfortunately.
Mm,
But we got one call out, and it was the cleaner accidentally set off the alarm. That was it.
mm,
There
yeah,
wasn't anyone in the cells. However, the next day we had two night shifts in a row. Of course, the river dropped, so it got called back out again, and it was absolute mayhem.
yeah.
And so now you can actually understand why these liquor laws are in place.
Oh, of
Um,
course. Yeah,
and however, where's the responsibility of the people consuming it?
yeah.
Um, and I think it needs to go back that way a little bit. So,
Mm.
yeah, mate, you got anything more to add on that?
No, mate, I reckon that's it. I bloody just a little yarn. It's only a short one today, but
Hmm.
he didn't make any suggestion. He just said it's a fairly unique thing. The NT Liquor Act is fairly unique in the country. I believe there's very similar sort of setups, like you mentioned, in northern Queensland, in those communities up there, and northern WA and northern South Australia. I know there are. So, yeah, it's just, you look at alcohol's consumed all over the world with varying levels of impact. So,
Yeah, well, that's right, and yeah, I mean, it was suggested basically just to because there's a lot of people that wouldn't understand why the Liquor Act or why it's different. When you get up to the Northern Territory, and these are the reasons why,
mm,
and how I suppose complicated it can be at times,
yeah,
depending on different legislation and which area you're in. You had to know which legislation related to which. So.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so yeah, no, yeah. So thanks for that. It's probably a good talking point. And like you said, mate, we don't need to beat on too much, mate, because we have a lot of content coming up. So we're just
mm,
gonna just give you a short one this week to prepare, because I imagine we've probably got quite a few episodes coming up over the next week, and chatting to some really interesting people as well. So
yeah,
and
it
we've
should
got
be good.
Anzac Day.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
got Anzac Day. Little plan for Anzac Day. We'll see how that goes. We need to line a few flags up for that, but that's okay. And then next week, obviously, the National Suicide Prevention Conference at the International Convention Centre in Sydney, running on Tuesday and Wednesday. So that should be good. Well, I think it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but we'll be coming back on Thursday.
yep,
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. We'll sort of play that by ear and interview a few people and release a few episodes around that. So it should be good.
yep,
Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, mate. I reckon that'll just about do us. And
That'll
yeah,
do us.
we'll be back to you very, very shortly. But thanks for everybody listening, and keep the comments coming in, especially in relation to Ben Robert Smith or anything else that we chat about. And also, I've got to go back through. We got a heap of messages, so I will get to them. Hopefully, in the next week, Damo and I can actually filter through some of them, because we're basically spending the week together almost.
God
So,
help us. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Very good.
but all right, everyone. We'll see you next week.
All the best.